Excuse me. Okay, folks, so we are on video number 8, which is the great white shark's eye. Eyes. They've got 2 of them, so it's plural. Now, let me just show you. There's a great white shark's eye, okay? The conspicuous black eye right over there. Now, where do I start with the eye? The eye is very interesting on a great white shark, but I'll start with a sip of beer. I've heard so many times, I've heard people come to me, especially fishermen, and usually depending on how many brandies they've had or whiskeys after day's fishing, and they've told me that they saw this shark that was so big and the eye looked like a dinner plate or a side plate, and they talk about an eye like this size. And that's not true. Great white shark's eye is about that size, maximum size, okay? Because the eye grows to an optimum size and then the eye remains that size. It doesn't get bigger with a shark. The shark grows around the eye. In fact, I can look at, if you know great white sharks, I can look at a photograph of a great white shark and I'll be able to tell you, without anything as a reference, I'll be able to tell you whether that's a young great white shark or an older, larger great white shark, just based on the eye. Because in a young great white shark, the eye appears larger because it gets to the optimum size. So the eye appears very large in a young great white shark. But as it gets bigger, the eye seems to look smaller and smaller. The eye doesn't get smaller, but the shark grows around the eye. So you understand that. So that's one thing about the great white shark's eye. The second thing is that it's got a conspicuous black eye. There we go, conspicuous black eye. But it's not a black eye. The great white shark has got a large black pupil. And if you're diving with them, you're in the cage and they come past close, or you're free diving with them, you'll notice very clearly, you'll notice the actual pupil of the eye. But what you would call the white of the eye is also very dark. It's like a dark indigo purple color. But it appears, it's so dark that it appears that the entire eye is black. But it's not black. It's actually got a pupil, and the white of the eye is dark enough that it appears that the entire eye is black. So that's the second interesting thing about a great white shark's eye. Before I go any further, great white sharks have got very good vision, and they also have color vision. There's some people out there that will disagree with me, but great white sharks have good color vision as well. They've got very good vision. They're very light sensitive. When I mean they're light sensitive, when a great white shark is swimming in the water, even if you're scuba diving and you've got a mask on, a great white shark will be able to see you before you see it, because it's far more light sensitive than you are. Far more light sensitive than you are. So they see very well underwater, but of course they don't have X-ray vision. So when the water visibility is poor, you know, then they can only see that far, or this far, or that far. But it's amazing how they find the bait and they find their prey. And I explained that in the previous video with the Emperor lawrencei and the lateral line. Now, most shark species have got what you call a nictitating membrane. Now, a nictitating membrane is kind of an eye lid. And when there's danger around the shark's head, the nictitating membrane will cover the eye for protection. But these are generally much smaller animals. A great white shark does not have a nictitating membrane, because a nictitating membrane would not be sufficient to protect a great white shark's eye or eyes. So what they do, what a great white shark does when it's hunting and when it feels there's danger on the eye, the entire eye rolls back in the socket. So here's the eye, it'll roll back in the socket, and as it rolls back, you see the white. They say the white of the eye, but it's not the white of the eye. It's actually the back of the eye and the side of the eye, and it's it's pretty thick tissue. But as it rolls back in the eye, so the eye actually rolls right back into the socket or into the skull in a way, and it exposes the thicker, tougher tissue, this white tissue. And as the eye rolls back, it actually depresses into the head, into the skull, for want of a better term. And I've seen many, hundreds of great white sharks where there's a scar running right across the eye. So you'll have a shark like this, and you'll have a scar running from there right across the eye. And your mind, your logic says to you, but how come the eye isn't ripped? How come the eye isn't slashed? The reason the eye isn't slashed is because whatever scarred the animal, whether it was another shark, or whether it was a sharp bone, or a seal's claw, or whatever it may be, as that scar was formed, the shark rolled its eye backwards, the eye was protected, and the damage went across the eye to the other side. So you often see scars around and across what you would think is across the eye itself. But the eye is protected. And out of the thousands of great white sharks I've worked with, I kid you not, I've only come across one animal with a opaque eye, where you could see that the shark was blind in the eye because they had been damaged. So it was still functioning fine, just with one eye. Now, let me explain to you more in depth why it has to roll the eye back and why a nictitating membrane wouldn't suffice for protection. So you got a ragged-tooth shark, or you got a blue shark, or you got a mako shark. But let's just take one of them. So you got a blue shark. Now, a blue shark primarily feeds on squid. It feeds on mackerel. It'll feed on small tuna, etc. So it comes along and it grabs the tuna or it grabs the squid, and there's not much danger around its eye and its head. It'll grab the prey, doesn't really pose a danger to the eye. A ragged-tooth shark will come up and it glides slowly to the water like that, and it almost doesn't move, and a fish will swim close to it and it'll go boom, and it'll grab the fish, and that's how it feeds, and it'll quickly rip the fish up and swallow it. So there's very little danger of this ragged-tooth shark's eye becoming damaged. But you got a great white shark like this, okay, and you got a seal on top of the water. My hand is a seal, and that shark comes up from the bottom. Now this shark, let's say the shark weighs 2,000 pounds, and let's say that seal weighs 500 pounds, and that shark comes up and hits that seal. Whap! It hits that seal, and it sinks its jaws into that seal, and it crushes, and as it sinks through, it starts ripping from side to side. It goes right through the rib cage of the seal. It breaks those ribs, it shatters those ribs. It could also be a dolphin, and it smashes those ribs off, and the shark starts shaking like this. Now you've got all these broken ribs around the shark's face, and a snapped off rib can be as sharp as a blade, literally as sharp as a blade, and that's where they get all the scars from. And the shark is ripping that seal apart, and those broken ribs and bones are around the shark's eyes and head. And if it only had a nictitating membrane, there would be an excellent chance that one of those ribs would pierce the eye and blind the shark. But the fact that the eyes roll backwards, those ribs and those broken bones can actually inflict damage and scarring around the shark's eyes, and without actually damaging the eyes, because the eyes have rolled back and they're out of danger completely. Obviously, there is a chance of one of those ribs sticking right into the shark's eye, but from my experience after working with thousands of great white sharks, I've only seen one shark with a opaque or damaged eye. So obviously the system they have where the eye rolls back in the head is a very efficient system in protecting the great white shark's eyes from damage. So that is what I can tell you about the eyes. The other thing I can tell you is, although they're very light sensitive, they obviously primarily use their eyes to examine objects underwater. They're very curious. They're very visual animals. And you've seen these movies and you've listened to these books and all the rest of it, and it talks about the glassy eye or the dead black eye. It isn't like that. That eye is constantly moving. When that shark, if you're underwater in a cage or you dive with a great white shark and it swims past you, he's watching you. That shark is watching you. And she's looking at you and the eye moves. And if you do this, you'll see the eye move and examine you. They're very curious. They're very visual animals. They've got this large, massive muscle around the eyes that actually control the eyes and move the eyes. And that is underwater. But they can also examine objects above water, and it's called spy hopping. And great white sharks will frequently come up and stick their heads, if this is the water surface, they'll frequently come up and stick their heads above the water surface like that, and they'll actually examine things above water like that, visually examine things. It'll obviously be overexposed. And what I mean by that is because they're so light sensitive, when they stick their heads above water, it'll be like kind of almost looking towards the sun for us. It'll be very bright, overexposed. But still, even when it's very bright outside and you actually need to put on sunglasses, you can still see things, you can still examine things. And it's the same with great white sharks. So they use their eyes, they're highly light sensitive, they've got very good eyesight, they've got an incredible means of protecting the eyes, and their eyes do not reach the size of dinner plates. So, next time you look at a picture, a photograph of a great white shark, and the eye appears very large compared to the shark's head, like really large, that will tell you that it's a young shark. You can't say exactly what size that shark is, but I could look at it and I'll tell you that shark's probably between 2.5 and maybe 3.2 meters long, plus minus. And then I can look at another picture of a great white shark, and depending on the eye in comparison to the head, I'll be able to tell you that shark's over 4 meters long and probably around about 4.5, maybe 4.8 meters long. And that it just takes practice. It just takes practice working with these animals and observing them. So that is what I can tell you about the eye. They use their eyes for hunting. They're very visual animals. They look after their eyes. The eyes are important for these animals. They got good eyesight and they have color vision. And I know there's one guy I know, scientist I know, shark scientist, white shark scientist, won't mention his name. But we had a debate the other day and he said to me, but they don't have color vision. And I said, how do you know they don't have color vision? He said, but they don't. I said, bullshit. They got color vision. Why do you think they prefer certain prey items? Why do you think they examine certain things? Great white sharks can recognize prey from the color of the prey. You can have fish in the water, right? Great white sharks can be very specific. We're going to be talking about their food pyramid and what they feed on in another video in their biology. But you can imagine there's a lot of fish that look very, very similar. Okay? But they got different coloration. And great white sharks have, when they can, they're actually quite picky about what they feed on. And they're also very specific about what they feed on at certain times of the year or certain times of their life cycle. And many of the fish look very similar. And a great white shark can identify those fish by the color of those animals and by the coloration of the prey items that it's actually hunting. If it only saw in black and white, it would make it very difficult for the great white shark to actually find a lot of the prey, because a lot of the prey would be able to hide away from the great white shark quite easily, because then it would just see the seabed and the prey all as one color, black and white, unless the prey was moving. But the prey would very quickly learn to just go and stand still, or sit still in a crevasse down on the bottom of the reef. And that is why I know that great white sharks have good eyes, good color vision. And I've seen it. I've seen them prefer certain colors many times. I'm not even going to go into it. I'm not going to debate it. I'm just telling you right now, great white sharks have got very good eyesight. They've got great color vision, and there's a mechanism that they use to protect that eye because they use the eye extensively, and it's very important for the animal. So thank you for that, and we shall move on to the next video.